Good evening, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the latest episode of the Hard Compound Live. For those of you who don't know, my name's Rich and I run and operate the Hard Compound. We are a one-stop shop for all things motorsport, F1, IndyCar, touring cars, bikes, rally, two wheels, four wheels, one wheel if we could. We do things like news articles. We do like race reviews, race previews. Looks back into history. We also do live interviews, as you've probably gathered. We are on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for @the Hard Compound on all of those. And we're on YouTube as well. Just go onto there and search for the Hard Compound, 3 words, hit that subscribe link, and you'll get access to all of our interviews that we have done. And they're also on the video section of the Facebook page as well. We've spoken to a number of excellent guests, and we have another one this evening. Just a quick rundown of a few that we've had. Not going to name them all. If you like the British touring cars, we've spoken to some stars past and present, the likes of Matt Neal, Steve Soper, John Cledland. We've also spoken to the boss of West Surrey Racing, Mr. Dick Bennett, who's responsible for launching the career of the likes of Ayrton Senna, Mika Hakkinen, Rubens Barrichello, and the like, and many, many more. We've spoken to the 1990 champion, Mr. Rob Gravitt, and we've spoken with the likes of Jade Edwards, Jake Hill, Ollie Jackson, Tom Chilton, Rick Parfitt, Chris Smiley, many drivers from the British Touring Car Championship. We've also had some ex-IndyCar, F1 and sports car drivers on, the likes of Danny Sullivan, Ari Lyondike, Mr. Willie T. Ribbs, David Brabham, Stefan Johansson. We've spoken to Derek Warwick, Ian Flutz, Tom Coronel, many excellent guests. And we've also had the honour and the privilege of speaking with Mr. Mario Andretti back in February. If any of those sound good, and hopefully they will, head over to the video section of our Facebook page or to our YouTube channel, and you can watch all of those back. Some absolutely fascinating interviews with some amazing people. Which brings us nicely on to our guest this evening. Our guest this evening is a former British, European and world karting champion. He's a driver coach. He's a thoroughly nice guy. And he is probably best known to those of us of a certain age as being the man that the great Ayrton Senna referred to as his biggest rival and the driver against whom he enjoyed racing more than anyone else in his illustrious career, which is quite an accolade. So without any further ado, I'm going to stop rambling and we're going to bring him in. So please join me in extending a very warm welcome to Mr. Terry Fullerton.
Evening, Rich.
And there we are. Evening, Terry. How are you?
Not bad, thanks. Not too bad. How are you doing?
Good. Yes, not too bad. Not too bad.
Good.
Bit of a hectic day, but better than it's better than being bored. And it's great to speak to you this evening. And thank you very, very much for coming on and sparing some time to have a chat with us.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Wonderful. Firstly, I just want to turn my attention just to the comments. Hello to those who have said hello already. Glenn, Hunter Fitzgerald, Oliver Taylor, Derek Cazzo, Dave Chambers, Simon Steele, and all the others. Thank you very much for tuning in and joining us. If you have any questions, do pop them in the comments. And as long as they're appropriate, we'll try and get them into the chat somewhere. We've got like Vanessa Muller as well. Vanessa Muller, she said she hasn't seen Terry since 1982. Okay. Greetings from her and her mum Irmi. I hope that's right. And she still remembers the great times on the racetracks. So what a great way to start.
Hi, Vanessa. I don't remember much about our meetings, but hi, how are you doing?
Fantastic. So yes, wonderful. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Any questions, pop them in there and we'll do our best to get to them as we go. But first, Terry, if I may, obviously, how's the last 18 months been for you? Obviously, it's been very difficult for all of us, isn't it? But it feels like we're getting somewhere back to normal, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's not been good for, I've got a 16-year-old daughter. It's been very bad for her. Locked up, not seeing her friends, not socializing. And that's been very rough on her. Personally, I'm not too bad. We just sort of living in my own head and in my own little world and getting on. So it didn't really bother me horrendously, but it is much nicer now to be getting back into the swing of things again. But no, obviously a bad period in most people's lives, the last 18 months, or whatever. Yeah, so it's everything in, I think, in most people's lives now is either before the lockdown or after the lockdown. That's going to be a big punctuation mark in everybody's life. And
Yes.
and I'm the same as everybody else with that. And really looking forward to things getting back to more normal way of life again now. So.
Yes, same here. As I say, it's been very difficult for a lot of people, and obviously more difficult for some than others. But yeah, we're fortunate that we've been able to hopefully come through the end of it, and hopefully this is it.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed. But most of the point, we've got some motorsport back, and we're allowed to go to tracks and watch it, which is absolutely excellent. So obviously, we're just going to have a bit of a chat, run through your career, and mention a few people who might be famous. As well. And but if I may, can we just start right at the very start for you? Where did your interest in motorsport come from? Was it within the family already, or was it just something that was just there?
It was in my family. It was actually my elder brother Alec who developed an interest in motorbikes when he was about 17. Not long out of school, just started working, and he bought or I think my dad actually may have bought it for him to go to work, a small Triumph Tiger Cub. It was called 200cc motorbike. He used to ride that backwards and forwards to work. He was working in a bank at the time, and he met a few other guys that were a bit more towards the kind of rocker kind of genre, or whatever you want to call it, and some not so normal people, some slightly off the beam people. And he started, putting clip-on handlebars on his bike and started racing around the streets and things like that. And eventually, he got into racing bikes, and he bought a 350 Norton and a 500 Norton, and he used to go around the country racing those bikes.
Wow.
And unfortunately, he got killed at Mallory Park in 1964.
Yes.
At Gerrard's Bend. I know a lot of people in motorsport will know that bend. It's a fairly famous bend. He was killed at Gerrard's in an accident that wasn't his fault. And that was it. That was obviously the end of his life, the end of his career, and a distraught family left in its wake. And myself and my brother, who was a couple of years older than me, had been going round to the races with Alec, who was like 10 years older than us. And we were kind of, his biggest fans, really. And we used to warm up the bikes for him and things like that. And we were very, very involved in it. And we were probably on the path to racing bikes ourselves. That's the way it felt anyway at the time. And although who knows what would have happened. Obviously, when Alec died, my parents, my father in particular, steered us away from bikes as much as we could. Saw an opportunity to buy a second-hand go-kart and try and get us involved in four wheels as opposed to two, because he considered that to be a lot safer, and it's true, it is safer. So and that's how we really got involved in karting to start with. That's more or less the way it started, and it grew from there. So
no, right. And I must admit, I mean, obviously, firstly, very sorry to hear what happened, all those years ago, and I was aware of it, and I wasn't going to bring it up, just in case. But obviously, from my point of view, I'm sort of glad that you sort of have an interest in bikes, because I get a bit of stick for bringing bikes into every chat that we have here, because not many people like them, and I'm a big fan of the bikes as well. So,
so many people I know in karting, especially, it's their favourite sport. MotoGP. It's the thing they love watching the most.
And I love MotoGP, the Worlds, and the Bennett's British Superbike. I just love it all. It's just fantastic racing.
So many people in karting, especially, love it. It's their favourite sport. So they kind of don't like to admit it too much, but it's true.
Yeah, they kind of say it quietly.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
But no, I mean, and I can understand where your father was coming from. I've got two young girls, and one's just getting interested in cars and loud noises and the things, and I'm sort of steering her onto four wheels as well, just in case.
There's something a lot more stable about four wheels than two, but
Yes.
Back in the 50s and 60s and 70s, bike racing was a very, very, very dangerous sport. It was
Yeah.
lethal. So, and the number of young men that have died racing bikes is actually horrendous. So, my dad was right to steer us away from that at that time without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
different now because in those days there was 10 meters runoff into something solid. Now there's 100 meters runoff into a properly designed barrier. So things are very different now. But
so the odds are more in the favour of the ride. I mean, my own father as well. Every time we go bike racing, he always mentions an incident at Crystal Palace, and you probably may have seen that they used to have like railway sleepers at the side, and as you say, there was 10 meters of runoff, and
some of the tracks, if you went and saw them, unbelievable.
Yeah, and he always says that there was one guy, and he said he just knew that he wasn't going to get back up. So, which is obviously awful, but it still happens. But obviously, mercifully, not as much, which is excellent. Obviously, you were steered away from the bikes and into the karts. When did you first really sort of get in the kart and think, I'm pretty good at this, and I can really make something out of this? Was there like a moment that you thought, yeah, this is what I can do really well?
There was a moment. I think I started racing in 1965 when I was 12 years old. So that was when I started. 11. My brother Alex was killed on the bike at Mallory in 1964 when I was 11. We were actually, we were involved in karts. I was actually racing karts by the time I was 12. And then when I was 13, that was the first year they held the British Junior Championship, the RAC officially sort of sanctioned championship, and I won that championship. And then, the following year I won it as well, and then the third year I also won it. So I did pretty well as a junior. And I suppose by the last year of being a junior, I was really, really hooked and very driven, and had a big desire to be as successful as I could in karting. Never ever connected it with cars at that stage. Saw it completely as a sport on its own, and didn't really connect it with anything other than just karting. I developed a strong desire to want to become an international driver, and possibly, my goal would be to try and go on and win the world championship, of which there was only one person in those days. So it's not like today where they have a whole lot of people that call themselves world champions. Back then, it was one world champion throughout the world. It was very clear who that was. So that was a real big deal to race in Europe, do the European Championships, representing your country there, and then going to the World Championships each year, and obviously trying to do as well as we could in those. There was a ladder, you're climbing a ladder, improving, most years. So I suppose my last year in juniors was when I thought, no, I'm good at this. I think I can go on and do really well, and I started to focus right, on the top end of karting. So that was about that.
Right, well, so that's when you thought something you can really excel at if you get the chance to do so. I just got on the on the notes here. You as you touched on, you're British Junior Karting Champion. I hope I got the years right. Was it 66, 67, 68?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Good. The research didn't fail me. Which is great. So at age 16, obviously, you qualified for Team GB, Team Great Britain for the World Karting Championships, but you weren't selected. Is that right for 69?
That was a bit of a strange carry on. But they had a team selection meeting. Actually, that year they had 2 team selection race meetings. So if you're interested in representing England in the European Championships, in either the 4-man team which they had or a 7-man team which they also had, you went to this race that was called the team selection meeting. There were 2 of them, as I said, that year, and I think I came second in one of the meetings, and I was probably in the lead, I think, of the other meeting when my engine blew. But we felt we'd done enough to make the 4-man team because this was supposed to be a team selection meeting. Sure. But I didn't get chosen for the team. I was put in the 7-man team because they felt that I needed more experience, before they moved me up to the 4-man team.
Oh, I see.
It wasn't just my decision, but my father and my brother, we decided that we thought, I should be, representing England in the 4-man team. we'd done enough in the selection meetings, we felt, and weren't chosen. So we had the option to go and race for Ireland, because I held an Irish passport at the time.
Yes.
My mother and father both, were originally from Ireland.
Oh, I see.
So,
Okay.
yeah,
Because I was going to ask how that came about.
yeah,
But
my
yeah,
mother and father were basically immigrants from Ireland,
right.
and I don't think they get in nowadays because of Brexit, but they brought them in those days. But anyway, so that's kind of my heritage, and but I was brought up in England. I felt completely English, obviously English school, English influences, everything like that. So I felt completely English, and wanted to represent my country as an English driver. But they didn't put me in the 4-man team. Said I was in the 7-man team. As a family group, we decided that we had an option to go and race in Europe for Ireland at the top level, actually, the 4-man team level. So that's what we did. We renounced my English license and took out an Irish license, which you're allowed to do. And all it meant was I couldn't race in national races in England. So we didn't do British Championships in England for a couple of years. We missed that. So I think 69 and 70, I didn't do any racing worth talking about in England. It was all, we did some European stuff and the European Championships and the World Championships abroad, which, we weren't particularly successful at, but it was very, it was great experience, and, a lot of knowledge was gained in those race meetings. And then in 71, I began to race for England with an English license again, this time picked for the 4-man team. And that began to become reasonably successful. And in fact, I came 4th at the World Championship that year in Turin in Italy in 1971. Wow. So that was my first sort of decent result.
Wow, that's
and then went on from there, really.
So that, obviously my knowledge of, I've just sort of pieced it together from bits of research and things like that. I mean, that feels like it was that kind of the time where it sort of really kind of clicked for you, do you think, on the world stage?
What, for myself, or you mean karting in general?
Or both, I guess.
Karting in general was still considered in those days. I mean, if you were involved in it at the top level, especially, it was pretty complicated, pretty intricate sport, and you had to get a lot of things right to be successful at it. And there were actually a lot of good drivers around. Of course, people didn't realise that at the time. Sure. But like Keke Rosberg and there were quite a few people knocking around in karting, the top end of karting. There were very good drivers. There's a guy called Francois Goldstein who dominated European karting for about 8 years, 7 years.
Right.
I think he won 5 world championships. Incredible driver. Masses of experience and natural ability, and clever guy as well, with the equipment. So, if you wanted to win and beat people like him, you had to be incredibly good and really on the case, So yeah, it was. If you were involved in it, it was a complicated, brilliant sport to be involved in. But on the outside, other people in motorsport, people in F1 or in motorsport in general, I think for fairly obvious reasons and understandable reasons, they really did look down their nose at karting. And sure. the kind of comment you get is, "Oh yeah, we had to go on those when we were on holiday at Bognor Regis last year." And things like that. It had definitely moved away from that by then, by a long way.
Of course,
it was misunderstood and looked down on that day. And then people like Petresi, who won the World Championship in '74, and then Ayrton, who came through in the late '70s, and Nigel Mansell, even, who came from karting. Not even, but Nigel Mansell came from karting, and Alain Prost. When those people moved from the top end of karting into the lower formulas in motorsport and then up through the ranks, they were the people who changed it, really changed the attitude of people in motorsport. And then by the time Ayrton had really come in the early '80s and mid '80s, karting had gained a respect that it never had in the '60s and '70s, really.
Right.
So
right.
Yeah, so that was a great thing that happened, and it's each year now. I mean, we all see the F1 grid; it's completely full of karters. The whole thing. And I was, I was in the same awning, for instance, driver coaching someone in 2014 who was, a teammate to Lando Norris.
Right.
So the karting thing now is, obviously the stepping stone to to car racing and ultimately Formula One. And it's a brilliant training ground. It's a fantastic training ground, and something I'm very proud to be involved with. So.
No, absolutely. I mean, some of what we do here, we sort of try and help some young karting guys. We've got 3 or 4 under our umbrella, I suppose. Some young lads, and you say there's some amazing talent out in karting, and as you say, the sky's the limit. If you can, maybe have a bit of luck go your way and meet the right people and get on the right path. That you said about Lando Norris in 2014. What's that? 7 years ago, and obviously he's been in the news this week. Very, very, very unfortunate with what happened.
Yeah.
If the race had started 5 minutes earlier, he'd have been fine on Sunday. But
I remember Lando having races like that in karting. Leading European Championship races in Europe. Well, obviously in Europe, in Genk in Belgium. I remember leading. Engine broke with just a few laps to go. He was completely distraught. And I remember talking to him after that and telling him, you're going places, mate. Your time will come. This wasn't your fault what happened today. Hold on to that. Your time's going to come. And his time is coming now, which is, like you say, 6 or 7 years later.
Yeah. And I'd be amazed if he's not a race winner this time next year, because he is.
For sure he's going to be.
He is. He's something else, isn't he? And I'm a big fan of Danny Ricciardo. I have been for a few years, and he's basically out driving him. He's very, 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 very good.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, fingers crossed for him. Just go back to your kind of thing. Back in the back in 1971. I mean, obviously, I've said my knowledge of karting isn't sort of as detailed as other series. Which circuits did you race at back in, say, 71, that year where you came 4th overall? You mentioned like Turin. Was it just all the big sort of venues around the world? Was it? Or
well, England wasn't blessed with too many great kart tracks. So we had a few, but they were pretty small, pretty narrow. And that, I mean, we have one just outside London, Rye House, which is a fairly famous track.
Yeah.
They did have a world championship round and a few big races there in the 70s and late 60s, I believe. But they used to place the big the CIK, the Commission of International for Karting, used to place the big European races at the best tracks they could find in Italy and France and places like that. Right. But that the track I was talking about, or the race I was talking about in 1971 in Turin, that was a great track, very good track. So and there were other great tracks around. 72 we raced in Kalmar in Sweden, was the World Championship, and 73 was Nivelles in Belgium. 74 Estoril, a track that was just actually used the start-finish straight of the Formula One track, and then came off that, and then they built a kart track, off the back of the pit road and then down and back on the start and finish straight. It was a great track actually.
Wow!
And of course, you're able to use the grandstand, which for the World Championship was completely packed full. I think held between 10 and 12,000 people at one grandstand. So great atmosphere and things like that. The World Championships in those days were big and very good events, very full of atmosphere, full of excitement, full of anticipation, etc., etc. So they were great events in those days, always with big crowds, 20,000 plus spectators, and a big deal because it was a one-off thing. There was only one World Championship in the whole year, and that was it. And there'd be say 180 drivers at a World Championship, 170 drivers from maybe 24, 25 nations around the world, and very competitive and a good period in karting history. The 70s and the 80s were a good period. They're pretty good times for a lot of the people involved in that, and a lot of great drivers came through those years too.
Yeah, it was like some of the names you mentioned before, Riccardo Patrese and Alan Prost and Mance. I mean, obviously, I was born in '81, so that's kind of my era. I got into it when I was very young, and so those, obviously, I knew those names came through, and to go on to do what they did, having been in karting, it just shows how good and how booming, I suppose, it was at the time.
I've got good memories and clear memories of racing against people like Alain Prost and Riccardo Patrese, and obviously Ayrton Senna, and got very, very, very clear memories racing against those guys in karting. And they were making careers for themselves in karting. So But
Wow.
then the time was right for them to move on to cars. So that's what they did. But there we go.
Yeah, brilliant. Obviously, we're going to come to Mr. Senna a bit later. I think a few people have tuned in for the Ayrton Senna side, the Ayrton Senna tales and that kind of thing, and your take on things, which is going to be fascinating, of course. While we're on the subject of tracks, though, I've just seen a question pop up from Gary Metcalf. Evening, Gary. He says, does Terry have any memories of racing at Fullerton kart track?
Yeah, I do have memories racing there. They had a British Championship there in 1979. And I don't even know. I can't remember who won it. I remember Mike Wilson was there. He come over from Italy. He was racing. I think Mickey Allen won actually. Yeah, Mickey Allen won that year.
Right.
100 international race anyway. Yeah, and I'd actually been over in Italy and driven back. Got back to Felton for the British Championship. I think on the Thursday night or the Friday morning or something, and I was completely knackered. And but I did the race anyway. But everything caught up with me on the Sunday, and I just couldn't drive properly on the Sunday, so didn't get a result.
Right.
Mickey Allen won it, I believe. Mike Wilson was there. He'd come back from Italy to compete. Yeah, it was a good British Championship, I remember. Yeah, a lot of people have got good memories of Felton. I know that. A lot of people, grew up with that as their local track, and they remember the big stuff there as well, the big races. So yeah, Felton's a reasonable sized part of British karting history. So yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, Gary. Thank you for the question. Yeah, I'm just going to fast forward a couple of years from 71 to 1973. The year you became the karting world champion, I believe you were the first Brit, I suppose, to win it. That must have felt pretty good.
Yeah, it did. I was the first senior guy to win it. There'd been
Yeah.
a couple of English guys won the junior world championship, which Alan Prost as well won a junior world championship. I was the first senior, first sort of over 16-year-old to win, first British guy to win as a senior. So yeah, that was quite special. Obviously, very special for me, fairly special for England as well. There's a lot of people seem to remember that, again, a brilliant weekend, a brilliant race for the World Championship with big entries and great racing and big and massive number of spectators.
Wow.
There was something that year they called England Hill. So many people come over from England to support me and the other British drivers. There was one part of the track that they called England Hill, and there were thousands of English people there. Wow. It's one of the few times I remember when I drive past, maybe on the warm-up lap or whatever, we can actually hear the crowd roaring above the sound of the engine. So it's a great feeling to be supported by so many people. And
must have.
I was lucky enough to go on and win that one, which really did put me on the map as an international driver. So.
Yeah, that must have been an amazing atmosphere to be there. Kind of want to go back in time now, go and sit on that hill just to see.
A long time ago now, but it was a great race. So.
Yeah, brilliant. I mean, just going into that year, obviously it came out. The end of the year ended very well with winning the championship. Did you sort of go into it thinking that you could do particularly well on the world stage, and had it been going well, and did you think everything's kind of just coming together, perhaps, or was it just one of those things that kind of crept up on you?
I was maturing as a driver, and we were a little team. It was my father, my brother, and me, and we were kind of a team, really, a family team doing it. I was the driver, Mick, my mechanic. Mick was my mechanic, and kind of advisor and etc. My dad did the engine work and was kind of the engineer almost. So but in the year before, I'd actually qualified. That was the year that the World Championships were held in Sweden, in Kalmar, in 1972. Won by Francois Goldstein in 1972, and I made grid 2 for the final in that race. And on the roll-up lap before the start of the race, my spark plug broke down, so I didn't even start the final, which was obviously a horrendous disappointment. But I'd reached the point where I was racing at the front with all the good guys, the best guys in Europe and the world, really. So when 1973 started, we were kind of on a mission to try and put everything together to win the World Championship that year. So
Right.
there was a big picture plan put together, and then eventually with Oscar Sala from Birrell in Italy and Bruno Grana from Miami, we were supplied with the best and latest Birrell karts and the best and latest Comet engines, and then I pedalled them fairly well, obviously, and as a team, it all came together and we won the World Championship. Yeah, so I've got great memories of that. I deal now with Ronnie Sala. He builds my kart, Fullerton kart, which I sell in England mostly. And Ronnie Sala, who's the head of Birrell now, I deal with him all the time. But back then I was dealing with his father, Oscar Sala, who was a great character as well and a brilliant driver in his own right. And I remember Oscar's father getting so excited at Nivelles, and after the first final, when I won the first final there, I remember him coming over to me in almost a blind panic, saying, "Don't panic, don't panic." A little bit like the guy on, the guy from, I've forgotten the program on TV.
Dad's Army.
That's it, Dad's Army. A bit like that. It was like being Italian. It was like, "Don't panic, don't panic." And actually, I wasn't panicking. I was pretty well under control, and he was the one out of control. But anyway, so that's 3 generations of the Sala family that I've been involved with and dealt with, and still am involved today. I was on the phone to Ronnie Sala the other day. So, so that's been something that's been a constant through all my karting career, both as a driver and as a driver coach and a karting manufacturer. So I mean, there's some good memories from that year, without a shadow of a doubt.
No, excellent. And and you mentioned your kart, which I'm going to sort of touch on a little later on, which is all very interesting. So obviously, you're the world champion, 1973. Everything's going very well. I must apologise. I've got a bit of a gap in my sort of knowledge of what you were up to in like the mid 70s. Were you still on the world scene, or were you doing other bits? Because I've got a note here. You did a bit of Formula Ford in New Zealand as well. I mean, were you?
No,
Just can you fill us in on what happened in the middle there?
No, in the mid 70s, like in 73, we had a great year. I won a lot of races. I won the British, won the European, I won the World Championship that year. The only race I think I didn't win that was of value was the Champions Cup in Italy, in Jesolo. I didn't win that race that year. I think I was second. And then in 74, we had the similar kind of year, but I suffered the fate that a lot of world champions suffer, in as much as when you win the world championship, the following year, you're kind of a little bit surplus to requirements for the big teams and the big manufacturers. They really don't want you to go on and win again. You're going to have to be a real force of nature to be able to make that happen again. Sure. And there have been some of those people. But it's very hard to fight against that. And so many people through the years, great drivers, I can think of their names now, but they've won a world championship. And then the next year, the manufacturers and the teams really don't quite know what to do with them, because they're going to be paid drivers, or they're not going to be paying for their drive. All they can really do, if they're on anybody's equipment or in any team, all they can really do is equal what they did the year before or lose. So they turn out not to be a very good prospect. And I was in that situation in 74. But we pushed through and we tried to do as best we could. And we did the World Championship. I don't remember the European Championship that year. I didn't win the British. But I do remember the World Championship. I qualified second, and Riccardo Petresi was on pole. And so I was in the running to do well again, but I seem to remember having a lot of engine failures. Right. So by the end of 74, it wasn't a great year. 75 was probably even worse. I think I won the British in 75, but I didn't win much else. So the European and the international racing didn't go so well. And by 76, I'd come away from Birrell, and I'd done a deal to race with Stevenson. It was called an English company they made a car called Stevenson Sprint. And they were based at Rye House. And I became I was a paid driver to drive with them, a professional driver with them. So, and pretty successful. I had a pretty good year that year as well. Didn't win the British. I remember being second in the British that year down at a track in the West Country called Clay Pigeons. A strange.
Yeah, Clay Pigeon. Yes,
Yeah.
it's still going now, isn't it?
It is still going now, yeah. And so I came second at the British Championship that year. Mickey Allen won it. A great British driver, Mickey, a really special driver. He won it that year. I actually started off the back of the grid in the final. I'd come from the B final. I started last in the A final and got right away through to second. But
Wow.
Mickey had gone, so no way of catching him. So I came second in the British that year.
Wow.
But that was a pretty decent year as well in many ways. But nothing. I didn't win a world championship. I didn't in '75. I didn't really feature in the world championship. Although I saw some pictures recently of me right at the front with Goldstein and that there. That was the year they had it in Paul Ricard. They made a kart track with the main straight again at Paul Ricard. And it went off around the pit lane and all that. Although it was actually quite a dangerous track, that one. There were quite a few people hurt at that race. But that was won by Goldstein again, Francois Goldstein. And I crashed in that one. I hurt my neck quite badly. And then that was 75. 76, the World Championships were in Hagen in Germany. And that was a brilliant meeting. I remember 20,000 spectators all hanging out of the trees and everything all over the place. Brilliant atmosphere.
Wow.
But once again, as I was coming through in some of the races, when I passed someone, when it first started happening, I'd pass someone going into a hairpin and coming out the hairpin, I'd hear a funny noise. I thought there was something wrong with my engine. And because the engine's loud in the car, it's really takes you, that's all you can hear. And then the next up, I'll pass another one into the same corner or out the corner, wherever. There'd be this other funny noise. What it was, I didn't realise it was the roar of the crowd.
Wow.
But after I tuned into the fact that if I passed someone, I got this massive roar. It's a fantastic feeling. And just you kind of felt like a gladiator in an arena or whatever. It was brilliant. And that was a brilliant world championship as well. Eventually won by a guy called Ravelli from Italy, who he won a couple of world championships in that era, with very good equipment, very good team, spared no expense with everything, but also a pretty decent driver. So
brilliant.
That was a brilliant world championship. A lot of people remember that one as well. 1976, 77 was 77. The world championships I think were in Parma in Italy. I think 78 was the first year that Ayrton came over from Brazil. Did the world championship at Le Mans. And I was fast there as well. Had some problems in heats. Came right from the B final through to the A final again there. I got up to sixth in the first final and had a crash with some guy from Switzerland. I won't talk about that, but
skip over.
Yeah, skip over that one. That was the introduction of Senna to European racing, really. And he caused quite a stir there. He was fast and and very flamboyant in his driving, and so you kind of knew someone special had arrived. And he didn't get a result, but he was fast, and he had some great races, some great heat races, and that. So. And I don't know if you want to go on, but I mean that was
that brings
that was the mid-70s as far as my karting career was concerned. Yeah, but and I'd gone from racing Birrell as an official sort of paid driver to racing Stevenson Sprint, which is an English company, as an official paid driver, to then on to driving Zipcar, which was a British company, probably the biggest British car manufacturer, as their paid driver in 77 and 78. So that was what happened in that period.
That's where you were. Right. That's brilliant. Thank you. And that brings it on to the next sort of bit I've got on my notes. In 1978, was it the factory ride with the Italian team? The DAP or DAP team, whatever you want to call them. How did that sort of come about? Was it just through what you'd done in the previous years and they came in and
the DAP connection was through Zipcars?
Right.
I was thinking about this the other day because I can't quite remember. How long ago is this now? We're all talking about 40 plus years ago. It's a long time ago. So testing people's memories, especially mine. But as far as I remember, Zip had an arrangement with DAP to sell their equipment somehow or other. I'm not sure if it was engines, but they made some beautiful magnesium wheels and brakes and carriers and all sorts of things, DAP. So Zip would had some kind of contract with them to sell this equipment in England, and because of their agreement with DAP, DAP asked if I could, drive their engines, use their engines. So it's like a reciprocal arrangement between Zip and DAP, and that was it. I was driving for Zip, but ended up, as a DAP driver basically with DAP engines that year. So and then that went on for 3 years, 78, 79, 80. And
Right.
the 3 years I drove with Ayrton.
Yeah. Right. Okay. And, well, and yeah, we're going to come to Ayrton fully very shortly. But obviously it was. Excuse me. I've got here. That was your. Was that was your first introduction to to Mr. Senna? What was your first sort of impressions of him, apart from the fact that he was very quick? Did you think he was a bit mad, or or what was that?
Not at all. No, he didn't come
Was
across
he very?
mad at all. He came across as fairly intense and fairly driven. And
It's probably a better word. Yeah.
yeah, he was. No, he wasn't. He didn't come across as mad at all. But intelligent, bright, sensitive, driven, focused. Although you can use all those words.
Yeah.
He had a proper intensity about him. You could almost see the intensity in the guy. He was pretty intense about what he was trying to do. Remember, he's only 17 years old, so he's a boy, really, and I was 24, 25. So I suppose you'd call me a man at that stage. So it was a boy and a man together in the same team. But, his gift showed, very, very early on. In fact, the first time we went testing was at Parma in Italy, the track in Italy, Parma, which is about 50 miles down the road from the DAP factory. We spent some days in the DAP factory getting our equipment together. In fact, this was just someone reminded me of this the other day. We took our Zip carts down there, probably on the Monday or the Tuesday before whatever race we were going to compete in. And we left the Zip carts there overnight. When we came back in the morning, the carts had been transformed into something that looked and was a lot nicer, with all the DAP magnesium parts on it, all the DAP carriers, the one-piece magnesium wheels. So they've been transformed into something really quite special with the carts. So, and anyway, that was the year. That was the first time that Ayrton was on the scene, and he was involved with his mechanics getting stuff ready as well. And I remember meeting him for the first time in the factory, and he was quite wary about me, a bit on the back foot, but still talkative and fairly open in a certain way. And that's it. We went testing to Parma. I can't even remember which race it was before. I think it may have been before Jesolo. If not, it would have been before the World Championship. But we went testing at Parma anyway. I remember testing slide carburetors, special new slide carburetors. Well, that actually may have been the following year, but we were testing a lot of new equipment anyway. And Ayrton actually went a bit faster than me. He went a couple of tenths faster than me, but he didn't have any lead on the cart, so that kind of gave him a little bit of an advantage. But he was effing quick, without a shadow of a doubt, and shocked a lot of people. It was like a shock to a lot of people. He's so fast, the kid.
It was like, who the heck's this guy? Type.
So fast, so gifted, and right out of the box immediately, incredibly fast. So
wow.
So speed was obviously never going to be a problem, and it never was. The speed was never a problem.
No, sure.
Controlling his personality and all that was more of an issue for him. And
obviously, that kind of carried through all the way through, didn't it?
He was so driven and so fired up and so lit, that it was really controlling. That was his mission to becoming a great driver. Which he did in the end. He did. But you could always tell he was only just about in control of things.
He was on the edge of it.
He was right on the edge, yeah. But when he had his great drives and that, he did control it. So he was like that in karting as well. When he saw it sort of flourishing as a new driver when he was very young, it was very interesting to watch that as well.
Right.
And then for me, he was supposed to be, probably the considered the best driver in the world at the time, or certainly one of the best drivers in the world. And as a paid driver with DAP, I've got this, kid comes along and he's so fast, obviously a little bit scary,
So, I'm sure, yeah.
So but I sort of embraced it and went with it, and it kind of upped my game as well. He was that quick that if I didn't perform at 100% of what I was capable of doing, he was going to beat me. So I had to push. He pushed me as well, pushed me hard. So.
No, sure, sure. Wow. Um, Something that I've wondered. Did you sort of get on, or was it sort of spiky now and again? Because I read somewhere that he pushed you in a swimming pool, or did he do that because you beat him or something? Did he?
Yeah, he did. Yeah, that happened. Yeah, that's a well told story, that one. But the first year, which was '78, he was it was very amicable. Our relationship very friendly, and it was like he was happy to look at me as the guy that he could learn off and learn with and move forward in that sort of mode. And I was very happy for that situation as well. So we actually got on very well the first year. And the second year, kind of similar, but started to get a little bit edgy, because he wasn't happy, unless he was winning, and he wasn't winning all the time, or he wasn't the fastest all the time. Not just me sometimes being faster than him, but other drivers as well. So things got a little bit more edgy the second year, but by the third year, it was definitely the gloves were off completely, and if he wasn't the fastest or winning, there was a problem. So that's what happened by the third year, and he'd gone from a 17-year-old to a quite a well experienced 19-year-old, top karter at that stage. So a top sort of professional racer in karting.
Right. I
So
see.
yeah, that's that. There were big changes in those 3 years.
I'm sure. Yeah, absolutely. I suppose with the best will in the world, I suppose there's an ego takeover as well. When you do start winning, he's probably thinking, how dare anyone come up behind me, and probably got a bit spiky with it, I imagine.
Ayrton, like quite a few of the great drivers. Well, in fact, probably I think all of them have this one thing in common: is that they believe they should be winning, and when they're in the lead and out in front and winning a race, or the checker flags for and they won a race, that's how the world should be for them.
Yeah.
And that's before the race, during the race, and after the race. There's no change in the mental state there. They should win, and certainly he had that in spades. That attitude,
Yeah.
he wasn't winning. Nothing to do with him. Something wrong. What's going
Yeah.
on?
Something must have happened. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. He was very much like that. But then I know other drivers who are like that as well. But Ian certainly had that on his side.
Well, we like see it today. You see it all over social media. If like Lewis Hamilton doesn't win, and he goes, oh, the tires are gone, or this was wrong, or that was wrong, and everyone says, oh, he's whinging, he's moaning. Same with Max Verstappen when he doesn't win, or whoever it is, goes, oh God, he's just whinging, he's moaning. So no, these guys, these are winners, and they like to win. And when they don't win, they're
Yeah,
not happy.
it's
And why
almost
should they
they
be?
like to win. It's like they must win.
Yeah, it's like
The world
that's
is
why
not
I'm
right
here.
unless they've won. So yeah, and that's that. Ayrton certainly had that. Yeah, like I say, there were other drivers around at the time that were similar too. It's not just Ayrton. I remember that about, but he was certainly one of them.
Yeah, no, sure, sure. Just want to come back to it, and then obviously what happened with him. Fairly shortly. I'll just say, I mean, obviously, that was coming towards the end of your time in karting, '83, that kind of a time. And obviously you've been world champion. You won the European karting championship 4 times, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No,
Um,
yeah.
and you sort of hung up the helmet in '84. Again, from my research. What was why did you decide to call it a day at that time?
A little bit of a complicated story, this one, but karting changed, or the top end of karting, world karting, European World Championship type karting changed quite dramatically in '81, and the engine, the power unit in the kart was changed from the traditional 100cc engine, which had been developed over the previous 20 years, I guess. Whereas most of them were rotary valves, so reed valves came in later, but the top class was changed from the 100cc to a 135cc engine, of which there was only one successful manufacturer at the time who was selling these engines and using them in America, and had lots of experience with them. But the other manufacturers like PCR and DAP and a few others had the option to race, to compete, but they didn't have engines ready to go. They didn't have engines, that were race tested, developed and all that. So there was only one engine that went on to win almost all the races. And that was the Comet engine from Miami. That fell by the wayside. PCR fell by the wayside. So their competition almost fell apart and was non-existent.
Right.
So that's the situation I was in. And as a professional driver, I wasn't able to race the Comet. I actually asked Grana if I could race the Comet, and he refused. He didn't want me to race. So I had nowhere to go really, because there was no competitive equipment for me to use and be a professional driver. So that was really the reason I ended in '84. I didn't really want to finish, but I had to finish because there was nowhere to go.
It was just a set. It was just a set of circumstances that was.
Right, it was a set of circumstances, that happened. I was probably kind of ready to give up anyway. I was 32 years old,
Right.
So one way or the other, that's the way it ended.
No. Okay. No. Fair enough. I mean, I suppose that kind of, if that happens, sometimes drivers vanish. I mean, it still happens these days in all kinds of series. We've got a lot of followers who follow the British Touring Car Championship, and there's a lot of good drivers who are out of a seat this year just because of, a number of reasons. Drives aren't there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which shame. It's very quick. I saw a question earlier on. Derek Cadzo. I hope I've pronounced that correctly, Derek. He asked a while back. He actually said, Terry, you visited us in Canada in 1980 for the Race of Champions at Goodwood near Toronto, and proceeded to give us all a masterclass in how to drive a 100cc direct drive kart. I'd be interested to know your impressions of that race and the crowd over in Canada. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah, I do remember that race. Yeah, 1980. Yeah, I won the race in the end. It was quite an eventful race, I remember, on and off the track. On the track, there was a guy from Europe who'd come over. Who was a great driver as well. It was Tony Zorzal, a guy called Tony Zorzal, who was driving actually Birrell karts and Perilla engines. Great driver, great equipment, and a very professional guy. And he was the only opposition. The local Canadian guys really weren't quite on our level. So it was just me and Tony. Baby had a race to win the money in the final, because it was a money race,
Right.
And we knew, because we were so far ahead of the other guys, that even if we crashed, we would have time to get out, pick up the car, bump start it, and away you go, and still win the race. Because they were still in the caught up. So that brought another dimension to the racing between us, because we knew this, And in the final, Tony put his wheels up the inside of me at on the first corner at the end of the main straight, and if I had two choices, either swallowed it and gone through, and he was almost certainly going to win, or I didn't swallow it and we had an argument going into the corner, and then we'd see what happened. Right. Basically, that's what I did, So
option B.
So yeah, I took option B, and my kart spun and went off the track a little bit. His kart spun and went off the track a lot. I was able to restart before him, which was also before everybody else in the race, and I went on and won the race.
Right.
He was obviously fairly pissed off, but that was we were in, So that was it. But I remember the race. It was a great, it was a great week of a race. We had some great times in the evening. I went with my New Zealand mechanic, a guy called Ashley Sparks. So we were always having fun and going out and having a good laugh, and that was all good stuff. And I won the big race. The only slight disappointment was the guy who organised the race, fellow who owned the track. I won't say his name, but the guy who actually he took all my equipment off me and said he'd pay for it, and gave me some kind of check. He did the same with Tony Zorzal and his equipment, and then bounced the check. So we basically left our equipment there for nothing, and never got paid for it. Nor did Tony. I remember Tony didn't get paid for it as well. So that was a bad taste. I don't know whether the Canadian guys know that's what happened. I don't want to spoil their memories of it, really, but that did happen.
Oh, right. Wow. Well, there you go, guys.
I had a great week. It was a fantastic week.
Yeah, brilliant. I'm glad that I pronounced your surname correctly, Derek. But he said that he loves that you that you remember so much about the race in Canada, and thank you for coming over all those years ago.
I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was a pretty good track as well. Goodwood was a good track. So
excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. Just want to say hi to a couple of guys who have just come in. John Kane, hi John, and Thomas Day. Hello guys, thank you for tuning in as always. Don't worry about being late. Thank you very much. And apparently Derek didn't know about the equipment, but they all loved having you over there. So.
Yeah, well, we love being.
It's all good.
It was great. Yeah. I'm sure I made money anyway out there, because there was pretty decent money to win the final.
Yeah.
And they paid me that. I definitely got that. Just didn't
There
get
you go.
my equipment, but there we go.
No. Well, money in the back pocket always helps.
Yeah.
Always helps. Just very quick, someone, Simon Steele, who's tuned in, he mentioned to me during this week, he said that, I just want to confirm this. Did you share a Mini with David Coulthard at Mallory? He said he's got a note of it back in 1989. I couldn't find anything about that, but
You say share a Mini?
yeah, like a Mini. Yeah, said sharing a Mini. Apparently,
not a mini skirt. I hope. I mean,
well, who knows?
I definitely didn't share a mini skirt with David Coulthard. I
No.
wouldn't want to do that at any time. But
No, absolutely
no,
not.
I raced against David Coulthard once or twice in a Formula Ford. Yeah.
No, it could have been that.
After I stopped karting in the end of '84, didn't do anything for about 4 years. I was kind of a little bit lost in my life at that stage for a number of reasons. But anyway, in '89, I got the opportunity to do some testing and have a couple of races in a Formula Ford. So
Right.
just really for something to do, I did it. I went ahead and did it. And David was racing that year. He won the championship, I believe. And I did probably the first 4 races that year before I stopped doing any more. And I definitely raced against David at I think definitely at Thruxton and at Mallory and probably a couple of other tracks as well. Snetterton, I remember. I remember leading a race with him in second in the wet at Snetterton, Silverstone actually. So I remember passing him and him repassing me, and we had a bit of a dice at Silverstone. So I remember racing with David, but not in a Mini, in a Formula Ford.
Okay, yeah, maybe it's Formula Ford.
We had our own Formula Fords. We weren't both in the same one either.
So. No. No, sure. Just a quick one again from Derek. He's mentioned about Martin Hines. We all know Martin Hines is an absolute legend of karting, and obviously very sadly missed. He said, did you ever want to go into the 250cc gearbox karts? Was that ever a...
No, I didn't want to do that. That wasn't something that appealed to me at all.
Because I remember seeing those at Silverstone. I think Martin was racing. It was about 1988, I think it was. I remember seeing it at Silverstone, and it was absolutely bonkers.
Oh, they're incredibly fast. Yeah, they used
Just
to go
crazy.
around the tracks faster than the F3s and things, so which used to amaze me. In fact, people just didn't believe it, but they were faster than the F3s around lots of the tracks, I believe. And funny enough, it didn't really appeal to me that much. What appealed to me was the high level of competition at the top end of 100cc karting in Europe. And they were the things, where all the great drivers all came through that. They didn't go through 250 or anything like that in those days. They all went through the 100cc stuff, like Patrese and Mansell and Senna and all these people. They weren't going via the 250 route. In fact, that was just a path with its own end. It didn't go. There wasn't a path beyond 250. Right. Normally, older drivers that did that and eventually just retired and didn't go anywhere else. Whereas the other stuff, had a future and a pathway after that in motorsport. So that was what I was interested in, much more than the 250 stuff. Although I thoroughly agree, it was very spectacular and very fast, and kind of a good advert for karting in many ways. And Martin was, the best driver and the best, the best. But he won more than anybody else in those classes.
So. Yeah, I mean, I said I remember I was at Silverstone and my dad said, "Oh, there's like go-karts up next." I was like, "You what?" Even like age 7, I was like, "What?" Yeah. And then when I saw them going,
they must have been doing more than 120 on the straights.
I remember. I mean, given that the F1 cars had just been out for morning practice on the Saturday, and then these guys came past, and I remember thinking, I'm almost more impressed by that because they were crazy, absolutely crazy things.
Agreed.
Very...
When I was at work, when I was actually driving at Zip Karts in '77 and '78, and a little bit of '79, Martin was obviously very involved in the 250 stuff then. So I used to see his karts being prepared in the factory, my karts being made and built in the factory. That was all going on at the same time. So
wow, fantastic. Great. Another question coming in. I'm going to move on very quickly, but Chris Kazora. Sorry, my scrabble isn't working. There we go. He said, all of you guys tuning in, you guys know your stuff. This is great. Chris has said, I've been fortunate enough to race at Le Mans on the 1978 World Cup track. What were your thoughts of the track and the event at Le Mans?
Well, I love the track. The track was a brilliant track. Perfectly suited to the karts of the time. Interesting, lots of passing places. Great track. Loved it. A little tiny bit dangerous, maybe, but some tracks were. A few people got themselves hurt at the corner at the end of the main straight. But there we go. No, it was a brilliant World Championship as well. Very atmospheric, great feeling. In fact, that week, I do also remember of the World Championship was the week Ronnie Peterson got killed in F1.
Monza, yeah.
That's a strong memory from that week as well.
Wow.
But brilliant race, brilliant weekend. There was something like 8 or 10 people appeared to be contenders to win that World Championship in '78.
Wow.
There was Mickey Allen, Ayrton Senna, there was me, there was a guy called Farby, there was the guy who eventually won at Lake Speed, Tony Zorzal, Mike Wilson. There were a whole group of excellent drivers that could have won that World Championship. And it turned out to be Lake Speed. But, no disrespect to Lake, but he was probably the 5th or 6th, most likely guy to win it. But, he stayed on and he did win it. So full credit to him.
Yeah.
It's a very, very competitive, great World Championship.
No, brilliant.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
It's disappointing for me in the end, but there we go.
Yeah. Sadly, can't win them all, I suppose. It's
well, that particular time, I couldn't really win any. I had lots of what appeared to be bad luck over that period of time. Well, that was another one I felt I should have won, but it didn't happen.
No, sure. No, amazing. And thanks, guys, for the questions. Very quickly, I'm trying not to make this all about Mr. Senna, but you can probably tell, folks, I've got a picture there of it. And there, obviously, we all know what happened with Ayrton in '94. I'm just going to take it back to '93 with. I just want to go straight in with this. The interview that he did when he was asked who his fiercest competitor was, and he just almost immediately came out with your name. That he said that it was you were his fiercest competitor, and it was the time of his racing career that he enjoyed the most because it was no politics and all the other nonsense that goes with F1. Obviously, and it came out in the Senna film and everything a few years ago. What did you think when he said that? It must have been quite surreal, but pretty cool.
Well, what happened was I had a good friend of mine, a fellow called Chris Lambden, who was a journalist in Australia at the time. He actually was the editor of a karting magazine in England for a while. He was also my mechanic for a year. This guy, Chris Lambden, still a good friend of mine, and living in Australia now. But back then, he was a journalist, and he was at the press conference where Ayrton said it. He was there live when he said it. And he actually told me, I'm not sure did we have email in those? I can't remember, but somehow or other, he told me that Ayrton had said this thing about basically I was the best driver he ever raced against. They weren't the words he used, but that was the way it got translated, and that's kind of what's followed on. So, so I heard that at the time, and I thought, well, okay, that's lovely. I'm glad he said that, but I think I know why he said it. I understand the circumstances, and great, fantastic. And then it just died away again. After a while, people didn't mention it again, and that was back. So he actually told me that at the time, which was '94, May '94, I believe. And then the film came out in was it 2010? I think
it was 2010. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the film came out in 2010. Certainly, it came out in Japan first. And somebody who was involved in karting and Formula One was at a race in Portugal, I think, where I was there coaching, and he said to me, "There's a film out about Senna, and at the end of it, he mentions you as one of the best guys he ever raced against." Okay, fair enough. That was the second time I heard about it, and then later when it came out in England the following year, and it was scheduled, like it previewed. It premiered in London. I got invited to the premiere, and it really blew up big then for me in 2011. So that was when it really sunk in that, you know, how important, I guess, or how big it was that he'd said things about it. So it was, it was only in 2011 then, you know, daily papers were after me for interviews, and I was on TV, I was on the One Show. It all kind of went nuts for about 3 months, which I thoroughly enjoyed, by the way. And
I'm sure, brilliant.
It's great, it's great. So that was it. That's how it all happened. And I sort of went from being kind of a well-known old guy in karting only to almost a well-known person in on the bigger stage, you know, of you know, international motorsport. So my name became sort of synonymous with it, and so on. So obviously I'm very, very happy he said those things. Very happy. I know he wouldn't have said them at the time. It's competitive, but you know, years later, I think he felt relaxed enough that he could probably, you know, say those things. Which is I'm very glad about. You know,
That's not. Must admit, I mean, when we announced that you were going to come on for a chat, most of the people went, "Oh, wow, fantastic!" And there was a few people that said, "Hang on, that's the guy that was mentioned in the centre thing." So, and obviously, you know, people who maybe weren't aware of your karting career and everything have now become more aware of it since, which is terrific.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, great stuff. Again, just I don't want to again make it too much about it, but well, he actually lived here in Reading, which is where I'm based, and he lived about a mile and a half that way. And there's a road named after him, but it wasn't where he lived, weirdly. But anyway, when obviously, I'm guessing you kind of kept an eye on what he was doing as he made his way up through, and he had that year with Martin Brundle in F3, which was lively. You know, he had the championship in the bag, but he just had to score points and didn't, and tried racing Martin and it took him off the track and almost took his head off. It was that kind of thing almost typical, Ayrton, in your mind. He was just that wanting to win even though he didn't have to.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he was going to he was, you know, a win at all costs kind of guy, you know, and he drove with his heart mostly, not his head. You know, although his head was very well engaged as well.
Sure.
I mean, the predominant thing about him was his heart, you know, his passion and his desire to succeed above all else. You know? And he certainly, he did that throughout his career. And, you know, he passed, you know, unpassable objects in order to do that. But I remember that year speaking to Ayrton at Silverstone at the F3 round of the British Championship there. I went down into his pit box and had a chat with him because somehow or other I ended up there watching the race and talking to him. He was still actually edgy about, you know, the time we'd spent together, so it wasn't completely relaxed and natural.
Right.
Now, I was fine, but he was still edgy.
He was still
anyway. And I spoke to him about the drivers he was driving against that year in F3 because I didn't really know. I'd heard a few of the names, I didn't really know, and you know, I mentioned a few people to him and asked his opinion of how good they were, you know, and it was all like head shakes and no great reactions to anyone except Martin Brundle, who said was good. You know, Martin was the class of the field. He wasn't including himself, I'd imagine. He was certainly the best guy out there, bar nobody else he was racing against. So that's the way the year panned out when the two of them really fought out the championship till the last race, I believe. I think Ayrton drove down to Italy and got a motor for the last race. I heard that story.
And then bolted it in, and
and that secured him the
sent him off over the horizon.
But Martin Brundle was an excellent driver, that's for sure. And Ayrton said that at the time.
Yeah, well, I think obviously, Martin Brundle had the accident where he smashed his legs up, or he smashed his feet up, or he did something. Forget exactly when it was, 85, perhaps 84. And obviously that sort of hindered him, much like it did with Johnny Herbert. But you know, two guys that could have certainly, gone all the way to the top. Certainly. Just very quick. Again, moving on with that, and I mean, he seemed to drive very well in the wet. Did you ever have a wet race with him, or did you just?
I had plenty of wet race. One of the races at Jesolo, probably '79, I think Jesolo was virtually a wet race. It was a wet race. So yeah, he was very good in the wet. No doubt about it. Yeah, you know, when you talk about, you know, the amount of feel a driver has for the amount of grip available, you know, that's really what, you know, stands out and makes a difference between a great driver and a good driver in many of the conditions in motorsport. You know, how fast can you go around this corner in the wet? Is it 110? Is it 115? Is it 112? That's all about your feel, isn't it? Your feel for the grip. And his feel for the grip was incredibly good, you know, unbelievably good. And that's why he was, you know, he'd be out of the pits first lap, boom, he's already got 100 yards lead on everybody. He'd do that sort of stuff very, very often. He had a brilliant feel for the grip. And he had that in karting. Yeah, and so I raced against him in the wet, and you know, that was evident in the wet. He had great, great kart control and great feel in the wet. Very good.
No, I mean, I think the famous race is Monaco, and then Estoril, his first, I believe, was his first win, and he lapped the whole field bar one, I think, and it was just monsoon conditions. Everyone was sliding off, and he was just pounding the laps in, and again, just showed how good he was. Last thing, obviously, Imola. You know, very, very sad weekend. Obviously, not just with Ayrton, but with Roland Ratzenberger and I think a couple of the fans were killed that weekend. And and there's the accident for Rubens Barrichello. It's just a really awful weekend. And I spoke with David Brabham a few weeks ago, and he obviously was Ratzenberger's teammate and everything. It's very sad for everyone in F1, certainly those close to it. How did you find out about it? And what was your reaction when we learned that Ayrton had left us?
Well, my reaction was, you know, massive shock.
Same as everyone, I guess. Yeah.
And I was on a cross-channel ferry coming from Calais to Dover. I've been driver coaching in France with a team, with a guy I know and some French drivers and some English drivers. I've been doing that over the weekend. I presume this was Sunday evening. Yeah, it would be Sunday evening of the Sunday of the race. I was coming home, and just normally, I think I was in the bar, and the barman, the guy behind the bar, it's a French boat, said him, you know, in quite an excited way, that Senna was dead. You know, Senna est mort, whatever they would say in French. I'm obviously shocked and said, "What?" You know, and he repeated it, that Senna is dead, and he made a sign like that. You know? And I thought, well, what the fuck? You know, this can't be right. You know, what's going on? So I remember going to call my brother from a phone that was on the boat. Back in those days, no cell phones.
Yeah, it was.
That was just pre-cell phone by a few years, I guess. There was a phone on the boat though, so I was able to call him somehow or other. And when still makes me a bit emotional now, actually.
No.
But when my brother answered the phone,
that's right. You don't have to.
Okay, now when my brother answered the phone, he was in tears. So he didn't actually say anything. He was in tears. So I knew it was true. You know, I knew it was true. So you know, pretty horrendous. You know, for so many people. You know, he was such a great driver, such a great person.
Yeah.
And you know, still is you know, an idol to so many people for very obvious reasons. You know, great man, great driver, and a tragic end.
Of course.
So yeah, that's it. That's how I found out about it. So.
Yeah, no, sure. No, thank you. Apologies for that. I didn't mean to bring it all back.
No problem. No problem.
But I mean, you know, personal point of view, I mean, obviously I wasn't as close, you know, to him as you were, or as many other were. But I remember I was 13 when it happened, and I remember because he was obviously brilliant, and I remember turning, you know, when they announced what had happened, and I sort of turned to my mum and just went, "Mum," and she looked at me and then looked at my dad and just sort of nodded. As if just, I was like, "Is it true?" And I don't remember this, but apparently I just ran upstairs, like buried my head in the pillow and started crying, and was there for like 2 hours. I've always said that was the day my childhood ended.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people felt, you know, there was a big shift for a lot of people. There's, you know, it had been 12 years since anybody had been killed in an F1.
Yeah,
12 years. So he was the first one to be killed in an F1. So people had got used to it not happening. You know, years before, in the 70s, the 60s and 70s, early 70s, they were dropping like flies.
It was every other race, wasn't it? It was.
But so many things have been sorted, and we've thought, we're better and safer. To
Yeah.
do with the design of the car and the safety zones on the car, and then the runoff areas and the barriers, and so many things had changed. 12 years before, since anyone had died, and I
Yeah.
was that first one, in a kind of a freak accident that
Yeah.
you
It
can
was just.
interpret in quite a few ways, can't you? But
I mean, that was the.
it was pretty horrendous
Yeah.
all round. And
That was awful. I mean, that was obviously we'd lost Ratzenberg the day before, and no disrespect to him and anyone, nobody would belittle what happened to to Roland either. But this was Senna. He was up. It couldn't happen.
yes,
Not
that's
not
right.
not to Senna.
Yeah, not to him. You wouldn't expect it at all. No, yeah, I agree. Yeah.
No, exactly. It was. Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was certainly something else. It was an awful weekend, but
And in the film, and there's so many of the shots of him at the race where he looks on edge and like there's something wrong and he shouldn't be there. And you
it's
almost
like
feel
he wasn't happy with
yeah,
with a lot of
you want to
things.
say, come on, get out the car, don't do this one, leave this one alone. This is a bad one, But he didn't, and he went and did it. But there's a lot of shots of him having second thoughts about what he's doing. This is after Ratzenberger died the day before, was killed the day before. So yeah, he was not in the best frame of mind doing the race on the Sunday. And,
No, sure.
But
Sure.
the way you went into the barrier, for me, something had to break on the car.
Yeah,
I don't think it was anything to do with Ayrton. That's what would look like to me. Of course, not an F1 driver, but I mean, that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I'd say the same thing. I've always said the same thing. It's just one of those things that could have happened 2 seconds earlier, 2 seconds later, and it might have been okay. Who knows?
Yeah,
but
absolutely. Even the way it happened, he was just very unlucky that a piece of the front suspension hit him in a very bad way, and ended his life. It was that one piece of metal that went through his helmet. So.
Yeah, just the worst. That's right. But
yeah. And apart from that, apparently he didn't have a mark on him.
There was no.
He'd been fine. Yeah, but there we go. Motor racing is dangerous, and that happened that day. So.
Yeah,
there we go.
Certainly, none of us will never forget it, and he's left a heck of a legacy, with regards to safety and the foundation that he's set up and all the other things that he's done. He's absolutely amazing. Thank you for talking about. I know it obviously wasn't the easiest. Just very quickly, moving on to your post racing, you've become like a driver coach. And you've coached a lot of names. I've just got a few here. The likes of Alan McNish, who's obviously done F1 and he's won Le Mans, and Paul Di Resta, Anthony Davidson. You got like Jahan Daravila, who's in F2. I believe you've coached all these guys. Also like Dan Weldon and Justin Wilson, who are obviously very, very sadly no longer with us. What sort of, I mean, when you were coaching these guys, did you think, yeah, these guys can go as far as they want? They've got it.
Yeah, to be honest, all those guys you mentioned there were, exceptional talents in their own right, And then, my job was to try and guide them and steer them and develop them in the best way possible, from a mental approach and, the actual physical approach of driving as well. So, yeah, I mean, but, I can't think of anyone you mentioned there that wasn't exceptional talent.
Yeah.
They all were. And, they all had different outcomes one way or the other. Some of them, some of them very unhappy, and some of them, very successful. But
which is great.
All of them great drivers. All of them great drivers.
Yeah. I'm guessing there's been maybe one or two that you thought might be on the way right to the top, and they've not quite made it. Obviously, not going to say any names or anything, but do you think sometimes things just don't work out, or is it like a mental thing sometimes?
Things don't work out sometimes, yeah. But these were guys who were trying to make the top, and got to the pretty high level. Almost all those guys you mentioned. I mean, Jahan now is on the cusp of F1. Whether he makes it next year or not quite sure. But he's done pretty well in F2, especially the last few races.
Yeah.
I was coaching him about 5 years ago, 6 years ago in top level karting. And then Dan Weldon, exceptional gift. I didn't actually have that much to do with coaching him, but he did use my carts and ride
Right.
my carts this last year in karting. And Justin Wilson, another great talent, very tall for a kart driver, but still did
Yeah.
exceptionally well. Paul DeRista, brilliant driver, incredibly gifted driver. Alan McNeish, a real little rocket of a driver.
Yeah.
I remember him being so fast so many times in karts.
Yeah.
And Anthony Davison, also a rocket in the go-kart. So yeah, these kids are especially gifted kids, and that all went up. I mean, Alan and Anthony did incredibly well in sports cars, didn't they?
Yeah.
Mon series and all that. So yeah, I mean, these were good memories I've got of almost all those guys. Too. Great memories as friends and as pupils and as drivers. So.
Excellent. No, it's great to hear. I mean, I read something and I sort of saw something with you that a few years ago, I think it was like 5, 6, 7 years ago, you said that a young Dutch lad called Max Verstappen might be a kid to watch.
Got that all wrong, didn't I? Got that all wrong.
Way off. Way off the mark.
That was wrong, yeah. Idiot.
Yeah. And that's yeah, you kind of got that right. What are your sort of thoughts on him now? I mean, he's obviously doing very, very well, isn't he? And possibly a bit hot-headed sometimes, but we can all be that, can't we? So,
well, I mean, if he were involved in karting through the years where Max was coming up through the ranks in karting, which started when he was about 10 or 11, by the way. I think he was in the kart much younger than that, but he began to be noticed around about 10 or 11 years old. And by 12, he was an established, top driver in the junior class. If you were around and seeing what was going on in those days, it became pretty evident by the time he was 14 or 15 he was going places. The other thing was, if you knew his father and you knew his mother, the gene pool there was going to turn out something pretty special.
Yes.
His mother was incredibly fast in the go-kart. Sophie Kumpen, brilliant driver. Fast in the go-kart. And Joss as well, a hard driver, tough guy, fast, smart, clever, aggressive driver. People used to be afraid of him, pull out of the way of him, and all. He was just a real sort of force of nature.
Yeah.
And you can see those qualities in Max now today. He has this force of nature feel about him, and obviously incredibly gifted. You see him go so well in the wet. You see him go so well when it starts to rain, when the track's a bit greasy. In all conditions, he's got this fantastic feel thing going on that Ayrton had as well. So it wasn't that difficult to actually see that Max would go on and be a special driver. In fact, it was quite easy, to be honest. And I think it's great for Formula One. It's really livened up the whole thing.
Definitely.
And Lewis has got to perform really at the top of his game to come out on top at the end of this year. It's been very welcome.
Definitely
welcome to bring some excitement back to the sport, because there have been some very dry periods where it's been very boring.
I mean, even Brits have got bored with Lewis winning, which is an odd thing, which is such a British thing to have, isn't it? We keep winning all the time. That's it. But I mean, I support the Brits in everything, in all sports, and I'll support Lewis till the cows come home. But there's a pretty big part of me that wants Max to win it this year, just to shake it up, and because he's just exciting.
Yeah,
it's just
I want the best, the best driver to win. I want so if Max can step up and be the best driver, he's going to win this year. That's what it seems to me. The equipment and the team and all that, they're matching Mercedes. So
definitely,
may the best man win, really, the best driver win. It's great to see a young talent like Max coming through and succeeding. Brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, because he's the first one that's really come in and hit the ground running, probably since Lewis did back in.
Yeah. But it was great to see when Lewis came in. That was brilliant to see as well. I remember that first year when he was in the team with Alonso in McLaren.
Yeah.
And, most of the time I was watching, he would just edge Alonso. He was just a little bit faster, a little bit, and then it was something that he made his mark that year for me, and he's carried that through and been a phenomenal driver in F1. And
definitely
a great, I think, a pretty decent ambassador for the sport as well, a good ambassador for the sport. there's a lot of feelings about him one way or the other. But
He gets a lot of stick, and I still don't quite get it.
He
But
gets a lot of stuff going on. Yeah, I know that. But as a driver, he's fantastic. The guy,
yeah,
unbelievable driver, incredible. He was in karting as well. I remember seeing him in karting back in 2000, 1999, 2000. And I was at many of the races he was doing, and he stood out above everybody else. Then he wasn't winning every race, but he stood out to me as the best driver amongst a lot of very good drivers. So he's gone on to prove that. So
yeah. And it's going to be a heck of an end to the year, isn't it? It's going to be it's going to be fun.
Hopefully, yeah. I don't want
Fingers
to see
crossed.
hurt, and it has got almost to that point. I don't want to see anyone get hurt, but
no.
The gloves that seem to be definitely off at the moment.
Yes, we've got to.
They're not going back on, I don't think. But there we go.
No, we've got to like the bare knuckle fight now, haven't we? I think.
Yeah, but thank God for that halo. At Monza.
Yeah.
And earlier in the year when that one exploded through the barrier, that was also saved by the halo.
Yes, Roman Grosjean, wasn't it, with the fire and.
I remember people saying, "Oh, we don't want that in Formula One, this, that, and the other."
I was one of them. I will hold my hands up and say I don't like it. It doesn't look right, but thank God it's here.
It was good. It was right. It's worked.
Yeah.
Justin Wilson wouldn't be dead with.
No, because it was the bodywork, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. And also John Surtees' boy.
Yes, Henry. Yeah.
Probably, I believe. So
it was the wheel, wasn't it, with him?
Yeah, a wheel hit him. Yeah.
At Brands. Yes, but we've come on a long way, so halo's a good thing. Again, just very, 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 very quickly, because I don't take up too much of your time. Actually, I've just seen one question. Who do you consider to be the best British kart driver you've seen who should have gone on to more success but didn't? I wasn't going to name any names, and you don't have to, but
the best one I've seen, the best British karter I've seen would be probably Alan McNeish, to be honest. I mean, Alan did go on and do some great stuff, but he was such an incredible talent at the time, standing head and shoulders more than that above his peers in karting at the time. Incredible driver, sort of on the level of Lando Norris, that kind of thing.
Wow.
But obviously a lot earlier on. But that good he was incredibly good.
Wow,
he's probably the one that he did make F1. He had a bad accident and ended up backing out of F1 for whatever reason. I'm not even sure why.
He had a crash at Donington, didn't he? I remember that.
Yeah, that was in F2, I think. And,
F2 or F3. Yeah, he went over the wall and
or a marshal got killed. And
that
disturbed him as well on his career path. But and then he had a bad accident himself when he was driving Toyota in F1.
Yeah,
he, lost the back of the car and it snapped round. He went into the barrier and it was a big one,
Yeah.
And but anyway, Alan was probably the most exceptional talent of all the people I've been involved with. But people like Danny Weldon as well, great talent.
Yeah.
And that was very unfortunate what happened to him. So Anthony Davison as well, brilliant talent too. So quite a few of them out there that didn't quite get through, but should have done. But there we go.
Yeah. No, sure. And it happens. It happens, doesn't it? Sometimes it doesn't fall your way. Very quick. Again, I'm just gonna tidy things up a bit. We started with karting. We're going to come back to karting. Just your thoughts on the karts of today. Obviously, they've developed so much. There's body kits and developments and all the other, a lot more stable and that kind of thing. Is there anything from the old days that you think we should have that back on karts, or anything that should be simplified?
The development of karts has been the development of the performance of karts basically stopped in mid-90s or the end of the 90s. Karts haven't developed in any real meaningful way since then. So that's 20 years of small, tiny little things, but nothing major. I mean, we had 50mm axles then, the 30mm tubing, the basic caster camber angles, the type of tubing they're using, the layout of the tubing. Most of the karts on the market now, if you put one on top of the other, the frame, they're identical.
Yeah.
They're all sort of semi-Tony kart clones, So, that side of the development's kind of stopped. Although the tubing, the material does make a difference, but the shape of the go-kart, etc., has more or less stopped. But karts are much easier to drive now than they were. in the 70s and 80s. Karts weren't easy to drive; they were pretty difficult to drive, and there was no adjustment. We didn't adjust caster and camber. We didn't have ride height adjustments. So there was very basic stuff you could change only, like move the seat a bit, and so you had to learn to drive around problems. So you had to be a little bit more ingenious in your approach to driving, which the kids aren't nowadays. If they've got a little bit of understeer, it'll show up on the data somehow or other. They'll see that on the data, and they'll just change the caster, camber angle, something like that. Job sorted. So the drivers are very cosseted and looked after in that way, where they weren't in the past. And the drivers had to think for themselves more in the past and be more ingenious about their decisions.
Yeah.
Whereas they don't nowadays. That's a big difference, I think.
I think that's a brilliant line. Drivers having to drive through problems. I think, or drive around problems. I think
problems. Yeah, because I remember,
brilliant line. Love that.
Understeer on the car. The only way to get rid of the understeer was to throw the car into the corner and use the brake to put the back of the car out, and then get on the gas early to keep the back out past the apex.
Wow.
That was the way you'd have to drive around an understeer problem. You couldn't come in and say, "I've got a little bit of understeer. Can you give me a click of pause, please?"
Yeah,
you couldn't do that in those days. So yeah, it was that is a big difference. And the kids now, but the way it is that the kids are looked after at the top end. I'm talking about the top end of karting, the European WSK stuff, which is really the sort of ladder to Formula racing. They're looked after by the teams very, very much so. Even to the point I've been standing beside some team owners, and they've been watching their driver, and the driver's just done something particularly silly, and the first instinct of the team owner was to have a go at the driver. Oh, what's he doing? What's he going on? What's happening?
Yeah.
And then I remember him saying to me, "Mind you, it's our fault, isn't it? We look after them all the time. When they've got to think for themselves, they can't." And that is true. So they're brought up to be, sort of little automatons that you tune the kart in, you sit them in it, you look at all the data, and they kind of learn to drive like that, which is actually what's required for when you go into the
further up
formulas. So
yeah.
So anyway, that's just a bit. The bodywork thing as well. Once they started putting bodywork on karts, things started to go wrong a bit then, because they were trying to make them look like little racing cars.
Yeah.
No one ever seems to say this, but that's what they were doing. They're trying to make them look like all racing cars, which they've managed to do. And then we got this front bumper problem, where originally, when the front bumper was put on the car and it was to be allowed to be used, it was fixed in a solid way. So it's kind of a battering ram. It's really good to knock somebody off, and so there were problems with that. And the marshals and the officials couldn't police it well enough to control it. So then they brought in this drop-down bumper, which has its own set of problems as well. So sometimes at the end of a race, you'll see almost half the grid as a drop-down penalty. I mean, they're not trying to bump people off. Just karting is a contact sport sometimes,
Yeah, it happens.
Yeah. You can't drive that close and not hit them occasionally. You're not trying to knock them off, but then the bumper drops down, they get this 5-second penalty. And very often you'll see the list of results where half the grid is a 5-second penalty. I mean, half the grid is not trying to knock the other person off. They're really not,
No.
So that's wrong, and that's a real pain in the arse. Not seeming to be anywhere on the horizon going to be sorted either. So.
No, I mean, as I said right at the top, we sort of keeping on 3 or 4 like karting lads, and we get the race reports, and they say, oh yeah, we finished 13th after a spin and whatever, but we ended up 4th.
Yeah.
Because everyone got penalties. That's and they said, okay, it's great, we'll take it, but you don't want to gain an advantage that way. That's not how
they finish second or third or even win. There's even been cases of big races like European Championship final races where on the roll-up lap, as they've gone out of the pit, something's happened and the bumper's gone slightly down. When the kid won the race, it happened to Travis Anuti at the European Championship 3 or 4 years ago, 5 years ago, something like that. And his bumper was down a little bit right from the word go. He won the final of the European Championship without touching anybody.
Yeah.
And when the flag went from the green line to flag, the whole race didn't touch anybody. Won the race, disqualified afterwards because his bumper was down. So that sort of thing, which is absurd.
And he obviously gained no advantage from it either.
It's absurd, but everyone goes, "Oh, shrugs his shoulders, well, whatever." So, there's something wrong there now with that, and that needs to be addressed and put right. But
Yeah.
there's been things like that through karting, through the ages. I mentioned the 135 category before. That was wrong, and people knew it was wrong by the time it had been World Championship had been raced on that level. After about the third or fourth year, people knew it was wrong. It was going nowhere. Eventually, the last World Championship they had in 135, I think there were 21 entries. Nobody was doing it anymore. It was propped up by the CIK. Eventually, they dropped it, but it was just took too long to them to come to their senses and drop it. So there's been things like that through karting. It's like they seem to have a history of it. But the other one I could mention was the pace car. They used to have a pace car that they brought.
Oh yeah, on a truck. Yeah,
mate, this is the most absurd thing you can actually believe in your life.
having a car.
It was very dangerous. It cost a lot of money to traipse around to all the tracks. He had his own van, his own driver, full time, this and the other, and it was to pace the karts on. It was a car to pace go-karts on a go-kart track, and there were times when it couldn't go fast enough that the karts wouldn't stall behind it. And
just because it was too big for the track, it was just
the drivers, especially the ones off the front, were also so dangerous. It's so dangerous when it pulls in because you're trying to speed up and pull in and get out of the way, and then the karts would go. But there were problems. Eventually, the pace car pulled off the track, spun out of control, and took down two of the CIK officials. Legs broken, arms broken, bad accident, big accident.
Whoa!
And it was at that point where the CIK went, okay, maybe we better stop this then. A little bit after that, they didn't stop straight away. But that thing was propped up for ages. It was so wrong,
You think, why do they persist with these things that are obviously causing problems?
No idea. You just pull your hair out, and then eventually you just accept it. But it was like was there no alternative to this racing car, half-ton racing car on a go-kart track? The other thing, they had a noise problem at that time, and this thing was the noisiest thing in the world. When it cranked up, it burst your eardrums, So
you got that coming at the guys behind them.
But it was mad. It was madness. There we go.
Bonkers. It just happens in all walks of life, doesn't it? Things are wrong and nothing's done. But
a few times.
Just going to wind it down, and we always try and wind it down with a few fun little questions. Who was, this may or may not be a daft question, I don't know, but who was the best racer that you raced against?
The best racer?
Yeah, the best driver, best racer.
I think if you break it all down properly, it would be Goldstein, Francois Goldstein.
Yeah,
probably. He was kind of not my idol, but he was the one that was winning everything at the top as I was coming through. And when I was 14, 15, 16, he was world champion. So I looked up to him quite a lot, but also he won a hell of a lot of races. He was a clever guy and a great driver. So I suppose he was the one probably. But Ayrton was a cracking driver as well. Mike Wilson, also a cracking driver. Both of those guys, had their own sort of quirks and things. So you could look at the biggest gift was Senna. He had the biggest gift of anybody. Mike Wilson, very, very determined guy. Very hard for him to come second. A straight race with anybody, he would generally win.
Right.
And Francois Goldstein, incredible all-round driver, ahead of his time in many, many aspects of racing as a racing driver and with the equipment. So, they're the three for me that stand out, those three.
Brilliant. What was the favourite circuit that you've driven on the karting world? Your favourite track?
People see, your favourite one ends up being the one you did really well at.
That you win at, yeah.
And that would be Jesolo, the Jesolo in Italy, which I had a lot of success at that track. So that and a great race against Ayrton in 1980 there as well. So that would probably be the one I would choose, Jesolo. Also, of all the tracks I ever raced at, it was so atmospheric and so much atmosphere and feel. Like in the race would always be in springtime in Italy. It was just packed with Italian atmosphere. And also, if you ever went back to that track, and if you had a bad meeting and you went back to that track on a Monday morning, the feeling of depression that would hit you because the crowd had gone and there was litter about.
It was just
It
flat.
it was such a desolate feeling because the atmosphere was so strong over the
Yeah.
weekend, you know, and powerful. That was a great race. That was probably my favourite race of all the races I did. We used to do it every year, Yeslo. So the Champions Cup, it was called. Brilliant race.
Yeah, so that'd be the one. Last one. What would you change in karting if you could change one thing in karting today? What would it be?
I think probably I'm going to narrow it down to just, you know, thinking about England, which is the nation I'm involved with at the moment in karting. There's far too many classes. There's far too many classes. I think that would probably be the thing to do. You know, I mean, if you count them up in the, you know, Rotax and X30, I don't know how many classes are, but we're talking 16, 17, 18 classes, to the best of my knowledge. There's far too many.
Which is crazy.
And also in Europe, when you have like the Army World Finals and the Rotax World Final, this, that, and the other, you end up at the end of the year with about 15 or 16 people saying they're world champions. You know,
yeah, in their class.
That's the absurdity of it. You know?
Yeah.
There should be one world champion, and the one that would be counted now would probably be the guy who wins the OK World Championships, which is, you know, what it should be probably. But you got, you know, the other people claim themselves as world champions. It's written all the time. You know, in my mind, they're not world champions, but in their minds, they are. You know, in a lot of people's minds, I think there's far too many classes. There's other things I would try and address, some bodywork stuff as well. That front bumper thing, that's just wrong. That's not right. You know,
it feels daft, doesn't it?
What they did was they brought something in. This happens quite often in other areas of sport. They bring something in that you know, the fixed front bumper that was wrong because it was a battering ram. So now they've got something wrong, and they're trying to make something wrong right. So they put the drop-down bar on it.
So made it worse.
Yeah, well, they've added another. They cured
another issue.
They cured one problem, but created another one. And so, and there's things in motorsport as well that are like that. The good example, so many people would disagree with me on this, but wings on cars. You know, when they first were introduced, they're faster, but they created another problem. You couldn't drive close. You know, the air was so disturbed you couldn't drive close, so no one could overtake each other. So then
we've got that in F1 now, haven't we?
Yeah, we got it. So they have to bring something in. Is it DRL or what do they call it? I don't know.
DRS, the open flappy wing, isn't it?
So someone can overtake somebody else, you know. And
now people are getting annoyed with it because it's a gimmick.
Finding cars for next year, apparently, you're going to hopefully help with. You know, but that was all because of wings. There's a problem, an inherent problem with wings.
Yeah,
wings are for aeroplanes, they're not for cars. You know, and that's it. Get on with the amount of grip you've got, you know, from gravity, and let's have racing like that. That's the way it should have developed, but it didn't. It went the wings route. Never going to get rid of them, and they for me have caused a whole lot of problems. Made F1 boring for many years. Yeah. So you know, the only overtaking ever done is in the pits. You know,
it's all strategy. Yeah.
Until you got this DRS thing where they overtake them about 50 mile an hour up the straight.
Yeah. Just because they've opened the wing up. Well, the guy who was the biggest vocal, most vocal against wings was like Jochen Rindt, wasn't it? He hated the things, didn't he, back in the day, and because they kept falling off and stuck him in the wall, and it was the
wing thing, you know, started, and then there was an inherent problem with the wing thing, so they made a change to the regulations. And then there was another problem inherent with that, so they made a change to the regulations. So, like, the problem's the wing. You know, get rid of the wing, go back to. But the thing is, I'm saying that, I'm wasting my breath. It's never going to happen.
No,
wings are on F1; they're staying forever. So, you know, that's it. That's it.
And plus, you can stick a sponsor's logo on a wing. That's money, isn't it? So
yeah, but I mean, there's places on cars for logos. So, you know, you can fit logo. That was the thing about the pace car in karting that they kept going for God knows how many years. There is a perfect vehicle to be a pace car for karting. It's a 125 shifter go-kart.
Right.
If you wanted, you could put panels on it with advertising, whatever you want. That's perfect. That can go around a go-kart track. That can stop. It can go fast enough so they're not stalling behind it. It can pull out of the way quicker. It was a perfect vehicle. They didn't use it. Imagine having a go-kart leading the Daytona 500 round on the lap. That's how absurd this thing was.
Yeah, that'd be something else, wouldn't it?
It would be, yeah. And they all go and run over the cart, you know.
Yeah. Bonkers. It's all gone mad. The world's gone mad. Yeah. But anyway, look, it's been an hour and 3/4 of your evening that we've taken, but thank you.
Jesus Christ, that's long, isn't it?
Flown by, isn't it? Time flies when you're having fun.
So they say.
But Firstly, thank you to everyone who's tuned in for the questions and the comments and for your interest in the chat. It's been absolutely brilliant. And of course, thank you to you, Terry, for joining us. It's been absolutely brilliant speaking to you, hearing all your insights and your thoughts and tales and memories and everything. It's been absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much.
No problems. Enjoyed it. Thank you.
Great stuff. And yeah, and we're back on with the interview next week, and we're going to announce that tomorrow. But so thank you, everyone, and thank you to Terry, and we'll see you all very soon.
Thanks, guys.